I'm Hollie Satona, and I am the parent and caregiver of my son who's 8 years old, Joelan, who has severe pulmonary hypertension. It's been kind of a whirlwind for Jojo since the day he was born. I didn't know about pulmonary hypertension until about 2 years ago, and I kind of wish I would have known some of the symptoms prior to diagnosis because I think he could have been diagnosed sooner. He was born with a large VSD and an ASD, and those were both repaired when he was 6 months old. And he seemed to be a normal kid after those repaired procedures until he was 6 years old and decided he wanted to go to T-ball. And so at T-ball practice the first night, he couldn't keep up. His heart was pounding, like you could visibly see his murmur, like visibly see it. So I'm like, oh, something's not right here. And I thought maybe one of the holes came back or there was something minor going on. Went to the doctor and he told me I was crazy. He's like, oh, he's just overtired from running bases and T-ball. I'm like, no. So then the next day I took him to his family doctor and I had him run up and down the hall. And as soon as he stopped and the doctor looked at him, he could see exactly what I was talking about and was instantly on the phone with the cardiologist. And it's been a whirlwind since then. So once we figured out getting him to the right doctors, the diagnosis was pretty quick. So it was like the first echocardiogram, the first cardiologist appointment after that we were sent to UW-Madison in Wisconsin to do a right heart catheterization. So June 28th, 2016 was his confirmed diagnosis. His pressures were over 145 at the catheterization. So we kind of got a rough start, a very quick, informed theory of what pulmonary hypertension was and the therapies. So it has been a challenge. The one thing I feel, though, is I kind of fight through challenges a lot with our lives. Our families are pretty busy. So it was an obstacle to overcome a busy lifestyle because pulmonary hypertension definitely puts the brakes on a lot of obstacles that we've faced. Throughout the diagnosis, there's been quite a few hospital stays and procedures that he's had done and some evaluations just because of the severity of his pressures. Right now, he's doing wonderful. We finally get everything controlled and stuff, but we definitely learned to juggle. It's like a circus. So we definitely are good at juggling between the kids because there's 4 boys in the family. So there a lot of consideration. We have a lot of good moral support and help with everything in the house. So I'm pretty lucky on that side. Not only is Jojo pulmonary hypertension, his older brother has hydrocephalus and epilepsy, and his younger brother has a cognitive disorder and he is on hearing aids. So between the 3 out of the 4 boys, we've been familiar with multitasking for a long time between all of the doctors we see and specialists. But for the main thing, my sister's been a really good support with the caregiver side of things as well. So she's trained. And my oldest son, who's 14, is actually trained to give and mix the medication and stuff for Joelan. So trying to balance everything out. And his dad's been really more of a moral support because he's not as strong, I think, as myself, where, sometimes that scares people. It's too much for some people, and it really is. Like, there's a lot that plays into consideration. But the challenge is between work, I work full-time as well as an accountant, and my job and my bosses have been very considerate of the situation. So if I have to leave work, there's no questions. I can literally drop and go. I work 2 miles from my house, so it literally takes me 2 minutes to get to the school, 2 minutes to get home. Doctor's office, not so much. That's about a 2-hour drive, but we've got a lot of responses in place in case of situations, whether it's ambulance. I am fortunate that one of the first responders is on my staff. So she's literally 2 steps away from me. So she gets the first call and then she's like, oh, let's go, Hollie. But we haven't had that. So we've got a lot of structures in place to consider in case something goes wrong. When Jojo was referred to St. Louis for a transplant evaluation, we were informed about the pot shunt procedure. And that's scary because for pediatrics, it's only been done at that time only maybe 12 times in the United States. And his cardiologist, the one thing she told me is she's like, that's kind of a death wish. Would you really risk your son's life? And then for me, I answered, isn't he already got one? Like, you just told me he has pulmonary hypertension. You said most chances if he lives over 5 years. So we feel like you're backed in a corner. So for me personally, to overcome these obstacles, there's 2 options you have when you're pushed in a corner. You can sit there, cry about it, and do nothing, or you can push forward and fight for it. And that's definitely how I do and how I handle things. I've overcame a lot of challenges aside from pulmonary hypertension, but it's definitely made it stronger too, move forward with the advances in the medication and therapies to, put trust in someone else's hands for the care of my son. Do the research. There's a lot of research that is available to do on your own. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and definitely don't be afraid to challenge them, because there's so much stuff that's coming out new that you may see or hear about, and they might not be familiar with those. So always push through it and make sure your doctors are allowing you to have that responsibility and respect. I'm really good at double checking everything, and that's the one thing you have to do. You protect your child. So questions, never be afraid to ask questions. I'm Hollie Satona, and I'm aware that I am rare.